The envelope in my hands felt heavier than it should. Summons and complaint. The bold letters screamed at me from the top of the page. Plaintiff, Thomas and Sandra Johnson. My parents. Defendant, Nicole Johnson. Me. They were suing me. They were suing me for my house. I had been standing in my living room just moments before, holding a picture frame I had just unpacked, smiling at the thought of finally having a place to call my own. 12 years of relentless saving, of saying no to every luxury, of living like a college student well into my 30s. And now, 30 days after moving in, my parents wanted to take it all away. The paper slipped from my fingers and scattered across the hardwood floor I had been so proud to afford. I sank down beside them, my back against the wall of boxes I had not yet unpacked, and wondered how I had gotten here. But I knew. I had always known. It started when I was 7 years old. I remember the exact moment because I had been so excited. My grandmother had given me a $20 bill for my birthday, crisp and new, and I had already picked out the stuffed elephant I wanted from the toy store window. I had been looking at it for weeks, saving the image in my mind, imagining how soft it would feel, what I would name it. My father intercepted me at the door. Thomas Johnson was a tall man with sharp features and sharper financial opinions. He taught high school mathematics, and he approached money with the same rigid precision he applied to algebra. He plucked the 20 from my small hands before I could even protest. "I am putting $15 into your college fund," he announced, his voice leaving no room for discussion. "You can keep $5, but you need to write down what you spend it on and why. We need to teach you financial responsibility early." I watched through the car window as we drove past the toy store, the elephant growing smaller in the distance. The $5 bought me a notebook instead, the one my father insisted I use to track my spending. The first entry read, "Notebook, $5, for tracking money." The page blurred as I wrote it. That was the beginning of what my father called the family ledger system. Every birthday, every holiday, every bit of cash that came my way, he was there with his leather-bound notebook, recording deposits into accounts I never saw. "This is for your own good, Nicole," he would say. "Most children squander their money on worthless toys. We are teaching you the value of long-term planning." My mother, Sandra, always nodded along, her perfectly styled hair bouncing with each affirmative movement of her head. "Your father is right, sweetheart. We know what is best for your future." But their future seemed to be progressing nicely. I noticed that while they preached frugality to me, my father was eyeing new cars in dealership lots, and my mother was showing off designer purses to her friends at church. When I asked to join the school choir, which required a $50 participation fee, I was told we could not afford it. That same month, my parents came home with a new flat-screen television. I learned early not to ask questions. The answers were always the same variations of "trust us," "we know better," and most effective of all, the silent treatment that could last for days if I pushed too hard. When I turned 16, I did something I thought would change everything. I got a job at the local supermarket, stocking shelves and running the register. The manager, Mr. Peterson, was a kind man with tired eyes who seemed to understand that some teenagers worked because they had to, not because they wanted extra spending money. I will never forget the feeling of my first paycheck. $147.32. It was not much, but it was mine. I had earned it with my own hands, my own time, my own effort. For 2 glorious days, I carried it in my backpack, feeling its weight, imagining the possibilities. My father called a family meeting on the 3rd day. He sat me down at the kitchen table, my mother beside him wearing her concerned face, the one she put on when they were about to deliver bad news disguised as wisdom. "Nicole, we have been thinking about your job," my father began, his hands folded on the table in front of him. "While we are proud of your initiative, we need to discuss the financial responsibilities that come with living under our roof." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You are benefiting from our home, our utilities, our food, our transportation. It is only fair that you contribute. 70% of your earnings will go into the family fund. 20% will be added to your college fund, which we manage. You may keep 10% for personal expenses, but those must be documented and approved." I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of mercy, but she simply nodded. "It is more than fair, Nicole. Most parents would take more." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that this was my money, that I was the one getting up at 5 in the morning before school, that my feet ached from standing all day, that I had earned every single cent. But I was 16, and they were my parents, and the alternative to compliance was never explicitly stated but always implied. Their house, their rules. If I did not like it, where exactly did I think I would go? So I handed over my paycheck, and I watched my father enter the amounts into his ledger with neat, precise handwriting. The 70% going into the family fund, the 20% going into my college fund, the 10%, $14.73, handed back to me like an allowance. My friend Katie from school noticed the change in me. We worked together at the supermarket, and she had her own stories about controlling parents. Her situation was different but familiar. Her parents did not believe in higher education for daughters. "Why waste money on college when you will just get married and have babies?" her father had said. She was saving every penny she could hide from them, planning her escape. We became allies. Two teenage girls trying to navigate the impossible mathematics of parents who saw their children as either investments or burdens, never simply as people deserving of autonomy. The college fund myth unraveled during my senior year of high school. I needed money for an application workshop, a $50 fee that could make the difference in my scholarship chances. I approached my father in his study, where he spent his evenings with his ledgers and investment magazines. "Dad, I need to access the college fund. Just $50. It is for a workshop that could help me get scholarships." I tried to sound confident, reasonable. He did not even look up from his magazine. "That money is invested in CDs. There are penalties for early withdrawal. You will have to find another way. But there must be thousands in there by now. I have been putting money in since I was 7. Surely $50 would not matter." I was pushing. I knew it. But desperation made me brave. The investments are structured for maximum return at maturity. Withdrawing now would be financially irresponsible. His voice had that final tone, the one that meant the discussion was over. But I could not let it go. Over the next few weeks I asked again, each time receiving a different explanation. The money was in mutual funds. The money was in bonds. The money was tied up in a diversified portfolio that could not be touched without significant penalties. Nothing added up. His explanations contradicted each other, and he grew increasingly irritated with my questions. Finally, one night, I overheard him talking to my mother in their bedroom. I had not meant to eavesdrop. I was just walking past their door on the way to the bathroom. "That new car was more expensive than we budgeted," my mother was saying, her voice worried. "How are we going to manage the payments?" "We will pull from Nicole's fund to bridge the gap. It is all the same money anyway, household finances. She does not need to know the specifics." My father's voice was casual, unconcerned. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand on the bathroom doorknob, unable to process what I had just heard. They had spent my money. The money from my birthday gifts, my Christmas money, my paychecks from hours of work. They had spent it on themselves. That night, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and made a decision. I was going to get out. Whatever it took, however long it took, I was going to build a life they could not touch. The explosion came a few months later when I told them I was majoring in accounting instead of law. My father had decided years ago that I would be a lawyer. Lawyers make real money, Nicole. Accountants are just glorified bookkeepers. But I had chosen accounting deliberately. I wanted to understand money, really understand it, in a way my father with his controlling ledgers and empty promises never did. "You are wasting your potential," he shouted, his face red with anger. "After everything we have invested in you, this is how you repay us? With mediocrity?" My mother cried, her mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "You are breaking this family apart, Nicole. Why are you being so selfish?" The ultimatum came swiftly. If I insisted on this foolish path, I was on my own financially. No help with tuition, no money for housing, nothing. I had expected this, had been preparing for it in my own small ways. But the reality still hit like a physical blow. I packed my clothes into 2 borrowed suitcases and left on a rainy afternoon in late August. My father stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, watching me struggle with my bags. He did not offer to help. My mother stayed inside, her crying audible from the driveway. The first year of college was brutal. I worked 3 jobs while taking a full course load. I shelved books at the university library, answered phones at a call center, and waited tables at a diner that stayed open until 3 in the morning. I slept 4, sometimes 5 hours a night. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I wore the same 3 outfits in rotation until they were threadbare. Katie became my roommate, my sister in survival. We split a tiny apartment off campus, splitting the rent between us, sharing textbooks, quizzing each other while we ate our budget meals. Her parents had followed through on their promise not to support her education. Like me, she was doing this alone. On the worst nights, when I was so tired I could barely see straight, when my feet ached from standing all day and my eyes burned from studying all night, Katie would make us instant coffee and remind me why we were doing this. "We are building something they can never take away," she would say. "We are proving we do not need them." Professor Wilson changed my trajectory in my sophomore year. He was a finance professor with silver hair and kind eyes, who noticed when I fell asleep during his lecture one day. Instead of being angry, he asked me to stay after class. "Miss Johnson, I have been reviewing your work. Your understanding of financial principles is exceptional, especially given your age and experience. But I am concerned about your well-being." He paused, studying me with a directness that made me uncomfortable. "How many hours a week are you working?" I told him. 45 to 50, depending on the week, plus full-time classes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "There is a scholarship I think you should apply for. It is competitive, but I believe you have a strong chance. It would cover your tuition and provide a stipend for living expenses. You could cut back on your work hours, focus on your studies. I applied that night, sitting at our kitchen table with Katie, crafting my essay on our shared laptop. 3 weeks later, I got the email. I had won the scholarship. I called Katie immediately, and we both cried on the phone, too overwhelmed with relief to speak in complete sentences. Professor Wilson became more than just a teacher. He taught me about credit scores, about mortgages, about building wealth through smart, informed decisions rather than rigid, fearful control. Money is a tool, Nicole, he told me once. Not a weapon. Your father treated it as a weapon, something to control and manipulate with, but you can choose differently. He introduced me to concepts my father had never mentioned, strategies for financial independence that had nothing to do with deprivation and everything to do with intentional choices. I started reading everything I could find about personal finance, about investing, about the kind of security that came from understanding rather than fear. My parents tried to reestablish contact during my spring break of sophomore year. They showed up at my apartment unannounced, a tactic I would later recognize as a deliberate attempt to catch me off guard. Nicole, we need to talk about your finances, my father said, not even greeting me first, not asking how I had been. We are concerned about the decisions you are making. You are making choices based on theory and inexperience. You need practical guidance. What he meant was control. What he meant was access to my bank account, my scholarship money, my work income. I told them no. It was the first time I had ever directly refused them anything, and the word felt strange in my mouth, powerful and terrifying at once. My mother cried, "Your financial rebellion is tearing this family apart. How can you be so ungrateful after everything we have done for you?" My father was less emotional, more calculated. "You are making a mistake, Nicole. You are going to regret this independence when it all falls apart, and it will. Then you will come crawling back, and we might not be there to help you." They left angry. They did not speak to me for 3 months, which I tried to tell myself was a relief but felt like punishment nonetheless. I did not go home that summer. Instead, I found an internship at a local accounting firm, and I rented a cheap apartment with Katie and another student. We survived on shared meals and board game nights and the growing realization that family did not have to be who you were born to. Family could be who you chose. That summer, I also met Michael. He was a software engineer with a startup downtown, and we met at a young professionals networking event the firm hosted. He was brilliant and kind, and when I told him about my situation, he did not judge or try to fix it. He just listened. Our first date was at a free concert in the park. Our second was cooking dinner together at his apartment, comparing recipes for cheap, healthy meals. By our third date, I knew I was falling for him. Not because he had money or status, but because he understood the value of building something real, something earned. Michael came from a family that treated money as a tool for opportunity, not a weapon for control. His parents had helped him through college but also taught him independence, how to budget, how to save, how to invest wisely without fear. He was everything my father pretended to be and nothing like what my father actually was. The next 10 years passed in a blur of work and discipline. I graduated with honors, landed a job at a reputable firm, and lived far below my means. Every raise, every bonus, every tax refund went straight into my house fund. I drove a 15-year-old car. I brought lunch from home every day. I cut my own hair. I said no to vacations, to new clothes, to dinners out, to every small luxury my coworkers indulged in. Katie did the same. We became each other's accountability partners, celebrating every $1,000 saved, every milestone reached. Michael joined our tight circle, bringing his own financial wisdom and unwavering support. My parents re-entered my life sporadically during those years, always when they needed something. The first time was 3 years after college. My father called, his voice artificially warm, asking how I was doing. I was immediately suspicious. He had not asked how I was doing in years. The real reason for his call came 15 minutes into the conversation. "Nicole, we have found ourselves in a bit of a cash flow situation. Nothing serious, just a temporary bridge we need to cross. $20,000 would solve the problem." I asked what the problem was. He grew defensive. "We do not need to justify our financial needs to you, Nicole. We are your parents. After everything we have done for you, the least you could do is help us in our time of need." I told him I could not give him $20,000, but I could help them create a budget, review their expenses, find areas to cut back. I was offering my professional expertise, genuinely trying to help. He hung up on me. The next call came a year later, $15,000 for mysterious medical expenses that he refused to detail. Then another call, 6 months after that, $30,000 for a business opportunity he would not explain. Each time I offered to help them plan, budget, or strategize, and each time they responded with anger at my refusal to simply hand over cash. The truth came out through a family friend who saw them at a luxury resort in Florida during the same week they had told me they were struggling financially. The business opportunity had been a timeshare. The medical expenses had been cosmetic procedures for my mother. The cash flow problem had been their addiction to living beyond their means while maintaining an image of middle-class respectability. Every dollar I saved became an act of rebellion. Every spreadsheet I maintained was proof that I could manage money better than they ever had. Every sacrifice I made was another step away from their control and toward a future they could not touch. After 12 years of relentless saving, I finally had enough for a down payment. Not just any down payment, but a full 20%, enough to avoid mortgage insurance and secure a favorable interest rate. I had researched the housing market for 3 years, watching trends, learning neighborhoods, understanding what I could truly afford versus what a bank might approve me for. Michael was with me when I got the mortgage approval. We were in my small apartment, the one I still rented despite being able to afford better, because every unnecessary dollar spent was a dollar not going toward my goal. When the email came through, I stared at the screen for a full minute before I could speak. "I got approved," I whispered. Michael hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, both of us laughing and crying at once. Finding the house took 6 more weeks of intensive searching. I looked at 43 properties, rejected each one for specific, researched reasons. Too much deferred maintenance, declining neighborhood values, poor school district affecting resale, unfavorable property tax assessment. My real estate agent, a patient woman named Gloria, told me I was the most thorough buyer she had ever worked with. Then I found it. A modest 3-bedroom house in the Riverside neighborhood, well-maintained, perfect bones, a small backyard with established trees. It was not fancy, but it was solid, and it was mine. I made an offer that evening. The closing process was smooth, professional, by the book. Everything my father had taught me to fear about homeownership was manageable when approached with actual knowledge, instead of paranoid control. I understood every document I signed, every fee I paid, every obligation I accepted. Katie and Michael were with me when I got the keys. The 3 of us stood in the empty living room, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace, security, home. I did not tell my parents. This was mine, earned through my own sacrifice and discipline, and I wanted to protect it from their inevitable criticism or demands. For 2 perfect weeks, I lived in my secret happiness, slowly moving my belongings from my apartment, painting walls, making this space mine. Then Barbara Thompson, a woman from my old neighborhood who was apparently now living 3 blocks from my new house, called my mother. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening. I was unpacking kitchen boxes, carefully arranging the dishes I had collected over the years, mostly mismatched items from thrift stores but mine nonetheless. "Nicole," my mother's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. "We just had a very interesting conversation with Barbara Thompson. She says she saw you moving into a house in Riverside, but that cannot be true, can it? Because surely you would have told your parents about such a major financial decision." My heart sank. "Yes, Mom. I bought a house." I tried to keep my voice steady. "You bought a house. Without consulting us, without even telling us. After everything we taught you about financial responsibility, you made the single biggest purchase of your life and hid it from us like a child hiding a bad report card." Her voice rose with each word. "Mom, I am 32 years old. I do not need permission to buy a house. I have been planning this for over a decade. I know what I am doing." I kept unpacking dishes as I spoke, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. "We will see about that. We will be there in 30 minutes. The line went dead. They arrived in 23 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, my stomach churning with dread, remembering every childhood lecture, every imposed rule, every moment I had been made to feel small and incompetent. My father walked through my house like an inspector looking for code violations. He ran his hand along the baseboards, peered at the caulking around the windows, frowned at the kitchen layout. My mother followed behind, her face a mask of concern and disappointment. "The kitchen is too small," my father announced. "This will hurt resale value." "The backyard is too much maintenance," my mother added. "You will be constantly dealing with those trees." "The neighborhood is either too expensive for your income bracket or it is declining in value," my father continued. "Either way, you have made a poor investment." I stood in my new living room, my hands clenched at my sides, and said nothing. I had learned long ago that defending myself only escalated their attacks. Finally, my father turned to face me directly, his expression the one he used when delivering what he considered irrefutable truth. "After everything we taught you about the financial trap of homeownership, after all our warnings about debt and long-term obligations, this is the choice you make? This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision we tried to protect you from." Something snapped inside me. Impulsive? I have been saving for this for 12 years. I have researched the market for 3 years. I put down 20% to avoid mortgage insurance. I have a fixed-rate mortgage that takes up only 22% of my take-home pay. This is the opposite of impulsive. "You planned this behind our backs for years?" My mother looked at me like I had betrayed her in the worst possible way. "I did not tell you because I knew this would be your reaction. I am 32 years old. I do not need your permission or approval for my financial decisions. I felt tears starting but refused to let them fall. My father stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something calculating move behind his eyes. You have done well for yourself, he said slowly. This career we did not want you to pursue has clearly paid off. And now you own an asset. A significant asset. He sat down on my second-hand couch without asking, and my mother sat beside him, her hand finding his in a gesture that made my skin prickle with warning. We have been doing some calculations, Nicole. We estimate that raising you from birth to 18 cost approximately $400,000. That is factoring in everything. Food, shelter, clothing, education, transportation, medical care, extracurricular activities, everything a child needs. I felt cold all over. What are you saying? What I am saying is that now that you are a property owner, now that you have demonstrated financial stability and assets, it is time to discuss repayment of what you owe us. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, handwritten in his meticulous script. We are willing to be reasonable. Either you sell this house and give us half the proceeds, or you take out a home equity loan and repay us what you owe. This cannot be real. This cannot be happening. I looked at my mother, searching for some sign that this was a joke, that they would laugh and tell me they were proud of me, but she just nodded, her expression serious. You chose this life of independence, Nicole. You refused our guidance, rejected our help, made it clear you did not need us. Fine. But that independence comes with responsibilities. You do not get to benefit from 18 years of our financial investment and then walk away owing us nothing. I will not do that. My voice shook but held firm. I earned this house. Every single dollar of the down payment came from my own work. You did not contribute anything to this. My father stood up, and the look on his face was one I had never seen before, something cold and mean. If you will not voluntarily acknowledge your financial obligation to us, we have other options. Do not forget that your mother and I have detailed records of every dollar we spent on you. A court would recognize our investment in your future. You cannot sue me for raising me. That is insane. But even as I said it, I felt a flicker of doubt. Could they? We will see what is insane when our lawyer contacts you. He moved toward the door, and my mother followed. We raised you better than this, Nicole. We expected gratitude, not greed. They left me standing in my living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, my dream home suddenly feeling like a target. I sank down onto the floor and finally let myself cry, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. When I could breathe again, I called Michael. He was there in 15 minutes, Katie right behind him. They found me still on the floor, the sunset casting long shadows through my new windows. They would not actually sue you, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Parents cannot sue their kids for the cost of raising them. That is not how the law works. But what if they try? What if they actually file something? I looked at Katie, who had been silent, her face pale. You know what they are like. They will not let this go. Then we fight, Katie said firmly. We find you the best lawyer we can afford, and we fight. You are not alone in this, Nick. You have never been alone in this. Not really. I wanted to believe her. I spent that night in my new house, lying on an air mattress in my empty bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I would lose everything I had worked for. The summons arrived 30 days later, delivered by a courier who did not care that he was handing me my worst nightmare. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Thomas and Sandra Johnson versus Nicole Johnson. They were demanding I sell my house and give them half the proceeds, or pay them $200,000 for the cost of raising me, plus interest. I called Michael first, then Katie. Then I sat on my floor and looked up family law attorneys in my area. The first 3 I called were either too expensive or not taking new clients. The fourth, Jennifer Chang, asked me to email her the summons and said she would call me back within the hour. She called back in 40 minutes. Miss Johnson, I have reviewed your case, and I want you to know right away that what your parents are attempting is legally baseless. Parents cannot sue their adult children for the cost of child rearing. However, I also know that defending yourself from a frivolous lawsuit is still stressful and expensive, so if you are interested, I would like to represent you. How much will this cost? I had savings, but they were for emergencies, for maintaining my house, for building my future. I am willing to work on a modified contingency basis. You pay my filing fees and costs, and if we win, which I am confident we will seek to have your parents pay your attorney fees. Her voice was calm, professional, and hearing it made me feel slightly less like I was drowning. We met the next day in her office, a small but tidy space in a building downtown. Jennifer was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and an efficiency that reminded me of myself. She listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. This is one of the more blatant cases of financial abuse I have encountered. Your parents have been exhibiting controlling behavior around money since you were a child. The fact that they are now attempting to monetize your adult success is both disturbing and, frankly, legally absurd. Can they win? I had to ask, even though I was afraid of the answer. No, but they can make your life miserable for a few months while we put together your defense. I am going to need documentation. Everything. Your tax return since you started working, your pay stubs, your scholarship information, your mortgage documents, your bank statements showing where your down payment came from. We need to prove beyond any doubt that you purchased this house entirely with your own earnings. The next 2 weeks were a blur of document gathering. I pulled tax returns from online archives, requested old pay stubs from former employers, contacted my university for scholarship records, printed out years of bank statements. My entire financial life, laid out in paper form, proof of every dollar I had earned and saved. My boss, Alan, noticed the strain I was under. I had always been the dependable one at work, early to arrive, last to leave, never taking sick days. Now I was distracted, making small errors in my spreadsheets, losing focus in meetings. He called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. "Nicole, what is going on? You have been off your game lately, and that is not like you." His concern was genuine, and it made me want to cry again. I told him everything. The whole story poured out, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My parents were the same way. Different details, but the same control, the same manipulation. It took me years to break free." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "This is my therapist. She specializes in family trauma. I think you should talk to her." I took the card. Dr. Patel. I called her that evening and got an appointment for the following week. Dr. Patel was a small woman with kind eyes and a direct manner. She listened to my story, asked probing questions, and then said something that changed how I saw everything. "Nicole, what your parents did to you has a name. It is called financial abuse. It is a form of control that is often overlooked because it does not leave visible scars, but it is abuse nonetheless. Children do not ask to be born. Parents who choose to have children have a legal and moral obligation to provide for them until they reach adulthood. Love should be unconditional, not a debt to be repaid." I sat in her office and cried for the third time in as many weeks, but these tears felt different. They felt like recognition, like finally having a name for the wrongness I had always sensed but could never articulate. The trial date was set for 8 weeks out. Jennifer filed our response, a detailed document that laid out my entire financial history and systematically destroyed every claim my parents made. She also filed a countermotion, requesting that the court order my parents to pay my legal fees due to the frivolous nature of their lawsuit. As the trial approached, Jennifer deposed witnesses. Professor Wilson agreed to testify about my academic achievements and financial independence during college. Katie agreed to speak about our shared struggles and how I had supported myself. Mr. Peterson from the supermarket agreed to discuss my work ethic and a disturbing conversation he once had with my father. Michael helped me prepare emotionally. We would sit together in the evenings, and he would quiz me on potential questions, helping me stay calm and focused. "You know the truth," he would remind me. "Just tell the truth." The night before the trial, I barely slept. I lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my house, wondering if I would still own it tomorrow, wondering what my parents would say, wondering if the judge would somehow believe their version of reality over mine. The morning of the trial, I dressed carefully in my navy suit, the one I wore to important client meetings. Michael and Katie both took the day off to be there. We drove to the courthouse together in silence, my hands shaking so badly that Michael had to help me with my seatbelt. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. My parents were already there with their attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My mother was dressed to look sympathetic, in a soft cardigan and modest jewelry. My father wore his most serious suit and his disappointed parent expression. Judge Morales entered, and we all stood. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the case file as we sat, her expression giving away nothing. The trial began with my parents' attorney presenting their case. He called my father to the stand first. My father spoke smoothly, confidently, about the costs of raising a child, the sacrifices parents make, the expectation of gratitude and reciprocity in family relationships. He presented his ledgers, his detailed records of expenses, his calculations of what I supposedly owed. When Jennifer cross-examined him, she was surgical in her precision. "Mr. Johnson, you testified that you maintained detailed financial records throughout Nicole's childhood. Did these records include the earnings from her part-time employment as a minor?" "Well, yes. Those funds were part of the overall family financial structure." His confidence wavered slightly. "And where did those earnings go specifically?" Jennifer handed him a document. "Can you show the court any separate account or fund where Nicole's earnings were held for her benefit? We maintained a unified approach to investment for maximum efficiency." He was starting to sound defensive. "So Nicole's earnings from her own labor, from jobs she worked while attending high school, were deposited into accounts you controlled and used for general household expenses? Jennifer's voice was calm, factual. We had household expenses. We provided for her for 18 years. The money was all interconnected. He was squirming now, and I could see the judge watching him with increased interest. And when Nicole needed money for her college application workshop, you told her the college fund could not be accessed due to investment penalties. Can you provide documentation of these penalty structures? It was years ago. Those records are difficult to locate. My father's voice had lost its certainty. But you maintained detailed records of all expenses related to raising Nicole. Surely you maintained equally detailed records of the college fund you claimed to be managing on her behalf? Jennifer let the question hang in the air. The investments were handled through our general portfolio. My father's face was flushed now. We took a unified approach to maximize returns, so there was never a separate college fund at all. Was there, Mr. Johnson? You collected your minor daughter's earnings, promised they were being saved for her education, and then used them for your personal expenses while telling her the money was unavailable when she actually needed it. Jennifer's words landed like hammer blows. We had living expenses. We provided for her. She owes us. My father was no longer the calm financial authority. He was angry and cornered. Judge Morales interrupted. Mr. Johnson, are you testifying that you appropriated your daughter's wages while she was a minor, claimed to be investing them for her benefit, but actually used them for personal expenses? The silence in the courtroom was deafening. My father opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. We had family expenses. We provided housing, food, everything a child needs. That money was compensation for what we invested in her. Judge Morales made a note, her expression unreadable. Continue, Miss Chang. Jennifer called Professor Wilson next. He took the stand with the same calm dignity he had always carried, and his testimony was devastating in its simplicity. He described me as one of the most dedicated students he had ever taught, working multiple jobs while maintaining a high GPA. He explained the scholarship he had helped me secure and emphasized that I had been completely financially independent from my parents from the age of 18 onward. She worked 40 to 50 hours a week while carrying a full course load, Professor Wilson said. I have been teaching for 30 years, and I have never seen a student work harder or demonstrate more financial discipline. When her parents visited campus and demanded access to her bank accounts, she came to me distressed but resolute. She knew accepting their control would undo everything she had worked for. My parents' attorney tried to discredit him, suggesting he had a biased affection for me as a student, but Professor Wilson calmly noted that he had hundreds of students over his career and remembered me specifically because of the extraordinary circumstances I had overcome. Then Jennifer called Mrs. Castillo, my old neighbor. I had not even known Jennifer had contacted her, but apparently Mrs. Castillo had vivid memories of my teenage years. I would see Nicole leaving for work at 5:30 in the morning while she was still in high school, Mrs. Castillo testified, her accent thick but her words clear. She wore her supermarket uniform. No child works those hours unless they have to. I asked her parents once if everything was okay, if Nicole needed to work so much. Her father told me it was teaching her responsibility. But I saw how thin she was, how tired. That was not a lesson. That was something else. My parents' attorney objected, but Judge Morales allowed the testimony. Then came Mr. Peterson, my former supermarket manager. His testimony was the most damaging. Jennifer had clearly prepared him well. I remember Nicole Johnson very clearly, he said. She was one of the best employees we had, reliable, hardworking, never complained. But I also remember a conversation I had with her father that troubled me greatly. He described how my father had come to the supermarket and demanded that my paychecks be deposited directly into an account he controlled. Mr. Peterson explained that company policy required direct payment to the employee, especially for minors, and that he had refused my father's request. Mr. Johnson became quite angry. Mr. Peterson testified. He said something that stuck with me. He said, "That money is not hers, it is payment toward her debt to us." Those were his exact words. Her debt to us. I thought it was strange at the time. Now I understand it was worse than strange. The courtroom felt heavier after his testimony. I could see some people in the gallery, strangers who had come to watch various cases, looking at my parents with open disgust. Jennifer called me to the stand last. I had been dreading this moment, afraid I would break down or say something wrong. But when I finally sat in the witness chair and looked out at the courtroom, I felt an unexpected calm. Jennifer guided me through my story chronologically, my childhood memories of money being taken away, the ledger system my father maintained, the job I worked as a teenager and how most of my earnings were seized, the empty promises about the college fund, the day I overheard my parents planning to use my money for their car payment. I described my college years, the 3 jobs, the exhaustion, the determination. I explained how I had saved for 12 years, living far below my means, tracking every dollar, researching the housing market. I walked the judge through my mortgage application, my 20% down payment, the fact that every single dollar had come from my own documented earnings. My parents' attorney cross-examined me, trying to paint me as ungrateful, as someone who had benefited from their care and now refused to acknowledge it. But I had lived this truth for too long to be shaken by his questions. "Did your parents not provide you with food and shelter for 18 years?" he asked. "Yes, they did, as they were legally obligated to do. I did not ask to be born. They chose to have a child, and with that choice came responsibilities they agreed to fulfill. But surely you recognize the financial sacrifice they made?" "I recognize that they spent money raising me, as all parents do. What I do not recognize is a debt. They took my birthday money. They took 70% of my teenage wages. They promised those funds were being saved for my education and then used them for personal expenses while telling me I could not access them. If anyone has a financial claim here, it might be me against them for the wages they misappropriated." The attorney moved on, clearly not getting the answers he wanted. When I was finally dismissed from the stand, my legs were shaking. But I had told my truth clearly and completely. Judge Morales called a 30-minute recess. Michael, Katie, and I went to a small conference room where Jennifer met us. "You did beautifully," she told me. "Your testimony was clear, factual, and compelling. The judge is taking this seriously." When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Morales had clearly made her decision. She did not waste time with preamble. "I have reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, and I must say, this is one of the most troubling cases I have encountered in my years on the bench." She looked directly at my parents, her expression stern. "The law is abundantly clear on this matter. Parents have a legal obligation to support their minor children. This obligation is not a loan. It is not an investment expecting returns. It is a fundamental duty that comes with the decision to bring a child into the world." My mother started crying softly. My father sat rigid, his jaw clenched. "The evidence shows that Miss Johnson has been completely financially independent since the age of 18. She worked multiple jobs to put herself through college, earned scholarships through academic merit, saved diligently for over a decade, and purchased her home entirely with funds she earned through her own labor. The plaintiffs have provided no evidence whatsoever that they contributed financially to this purchase." Judge Morales paused, letting her words sink in. "Moreover, the evidence suggests that the plaintiffs may have engaged in financial misconduct regarding their minor daughter's earnings. While that matter is outside the scope of today's proceedings, I note that Miss Johnson would potentially have grounds to pursue recovery of wages that were taken from her under false pretenses during her teenage years." I saw my father flinch at those words. The possibility that I could sue them had clearly never occurred to him. Therefore, the court finds no legal basis whatsoever for the plaintiff's claim. Parents cannot sue their adult children for the cost of child-rearing. This is not merely a matter of precedent but of fundamental legal and moral principles. The case is dismissed with prejudice. Judge Morales looked down at her notes, then back up at my parents. "Furthermore, given the frivolous and harassing nature of this lawsuit, I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendants reasonable attorney fees and court costs. This action was not brought in good faith, and Miss Johnson should not bear the financial burden of defending herself against a claim that had no legal merit from the outset." The gavel came down, and it was over. Just like that, after months of stress and fear, it was over. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to process what had just happened. My parents left quickly, their attorney ushering them out a side door. They did not look at me. My father's face was red with humiliation and anger. My mother was still crying, but whether from shame or fury, I could not tell. Michael pulled me into a hug, and Katie wrapped her arms around both of us. We stood there in the courtroom, the three of us holding each other while strangers filed out around us, probably heading to their own family dramas and legal battles. Jennifer packed up her briefcase with a satisfied smile. "I told you we would win," she said. "Your parents made the mistake of creating a detailed paper trail of their own misconduct. The ledgers they thought proved their case actually proved yours." The financial settlement took another 2 weeks to finalize. My parents were ordered to pay $23,000 in legal fees and court costs. Jennifer sent them a detailed invoice, and they paid in 3 installments, each one no doubt burning them with resentment. I did not hear from them directly. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no attempt at reconciliation, just silence, which was somehow more telling than any words could have been. Life slowly returned to a new normal. I continued unpacking my house, each box feeling lighter than before. I painted the bedroom a soft blue, Michael helping me tape the edges with precision. Katie brought plants for the porch, green living things that needed care and gave beauty in return. Dr. Patel helped me process what had happened, helping me understand that my parents' behavior was about their own issues, their own fears, their own need for control. It was never about me or anything I did wrong. "You were a child," she reminded me in one session. Children do not owe their parents anything beyond what children naturally give, which is love and the opportunity to nurture and guide. Your parents treated you like an investment portfolio, and that is a fundamental betrayal of the parent-child relationship. The healing was not linear. Some days I felt strong and vindicated. Other days I felt sad for the family I had never really had, grieving for the parents I had needed but never received. Dr. Patel assured me both responses were normal and healthy. 6 months after the trial, something unexpected happened. I received an email from a community center in a low-income neighborhood asking if I would be interested in teaching a financial literacy workshop for young people aging out of foster care. Professor Wilson had recommended me, the email said, suggesting I had both expertise and personal understanding of what it meant to navigate finances without family support. I said yes immediately. The first workshop was terrifying. I stood in front of 15 young people, most of them around 19 or 20, and I saw myself in their faces. The uncertainty, the fear, the determination to make it despite the odds. I taught them about budgeting, saving, credit scores, the basics I had learned through trial and error. But I also taught them something more important. I taught them that financial independence was not just about money. It was about freedom, about making choices based on your own values rather than someone else's control. After the session, a young woman named Maria approached me. She had dark circles under her eyes and wore clothes that were clean but worn. "Thank you," she said quietly. "My foster parents told me I should be grateful they fed me, that I owe them. But what you said about parents choosing to have or take in kids, about that being their responsibility, not something I have to pay back, that makes sense. Nobody ever said that before." I saw myself in Maria so clearly it hurt. I gave her my number and told her she could call me anytime she had questions about finances or anything else. She took the paper with my number on it and folded it carefully, tucking it into her wallet like it was something precious. The workshops grew. Word spread, and soon I was teaching twice a month, then every week. The community center offered me a small stipend, but I would have done it for free. These young people deserved what I had never received, which was honest guidance without manipulation, support without strings attached. Katie came to some of the workshops, sharing her own story of overcoming family expectations and financial control. Michael helped create handouts and simple budgeting spreadsheets. We became a team, offering these young people something none of us had been given, which was a safe space to learn and grow. One evening, about a year after the trial, I was sitting in my backyard garden. I had discovered I liked gardening, the simple satisfaction of putting seeds in soil and watching them grow. Michael was grilling vegetables on the small grill we had bought together. Katie was coming over for dinner, bringing her girlfriend Sarah, who we all adored. My phone rang with an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. "Nicole?" It was my mother's voice, smaller and older than I remembered. "Mom." I kept my voice neutral, my heart immediately racing. There was a long pause. I wanted to call and say, "Well, I wanted to say that your father and I have been thinking. We may have, that is, the lawsuit might have been a mistake." I waited, saying nothing, giving her space to either apologize genuinely or reveal that this was another manipulation. "We are having some financial difficulties," she continued, and I felt my stomach drop. "We thought perhaps you could help us create one of those budgets you mentioned. Not give us money," she added quickly, "just help us figure things out." I took a deep breath, looking at my garden, at Michael cooking our dinner, at the life I had built. "I can recommend a financial counselor," I said calmly. "There is an excellent nonprofit that offers free budgeting services. I will email you their information. But could not you just— Your father thought maybe you could." Her voice trailed off. "No, Mom. I cannot be your financial advisor, but I will send you resources that can help if you genuinely want to make changes." There was a long silence. "I am willing to have a relationship with you and Dad, but it has to be different than before. It has to be based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and no financial entanglement of any kind. If you can accept that, we can talk. If not, then I need to continue on my own path." "I see," she said quietly. "I will talk to your father." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a moment, processing the call, then forwarded her the information I had promised. Whether they would use it or not was their choice. I had done what I could without compromising my own boundaries. Michael looked over at me, a question in his eyes. I smiled and shook my head. "Later," I mouthed. He nodded and went back to the grill. Katie arrived with Sarah and a bottle of wine. We ate dinner in my backyard as the sun set, talking and laughing about everything and nothing. Sarah told funny stories about her nursing shifts. Katie shared updates about her promotion at work. Michael described a ridiculous bug in his code that had taken him 3 days to find. This was my family now. Not perfect, but real. Not bound by obligation or debt, but by genuine care and mutual support. We had all built our lives from difficult starting places, and we had found each other along the way. As I cleared the dinner plates, I noticed the doormat Michael had given me months ago, the one I had installed at my front door. Earned, not given, it proclaimed in bold letters. Every time I came home, I saw those words, and they reminded me of everything I had overcome. That night, after everyone left, I walked through my house, room by room. The bedroom with its soft blue walls, the kitchen with mismatched but functional dishes, the living room with the comfortable second-hand couch, the small office where I prepared my workshop materials. Every inch of this space represented a choice I had made, a sacrifice I had accepted, a boundary I had defended. I thought about the little girl who had watched her stuffed elephant disappear into the distance, who had learned that her desires did not matter as much as her father's control. I thought about the teenager who had worked before dawn, handing over most of her paycheck, believing she had no choice. I thought about the college student eating ramen and sleeping 4 hours a night, determined to build something her parents could not take away. And I thought about the woman I had become, the one who had stood in a courtroom and told her truth, who had defended her right to exist independently, who had refused to accept that love came with a price tag. The journey had been exhausting and painful and lonely at times, but standing in my home, surrounded by the evidence of my own capability and resilience, I felt something I had not felt in years: pride. Not arrogant pride, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had built something real and good from very little. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Thank you for dinner. I love you, and I am proud of you, today and every day." I smiled, typing back a response, then set my phone down and picked up a book from my shelf, one of many I had slowly collected over the years. I curled up on my couch, in my house, in my life, and felt utterly at peace. The story was not over, of course. Life is never that neat. There would be more complicated conversations with my parents, more therapy sessions to process old wounds, more moments of doubt and difficulty, but the fundamental truth had been established. I was free. I had earned my freedom, defended my freedom, and now I was learning to live in my freedom without guilt or fear. And that freedom, that hard-won independence, was worth every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of loneliness and struggle, because it was mine, earned, not given. Built on my own terms, with my own hands, through my own choices. I thought about Maria and the other young people in my workshops, and I hoped they could see in me what was possible. Not perfection, not wealth, not some fairy tale ending, but something more important. The possibility of building a life that reflected your own values, of setting boundaries that protected your peace, of choosing your family rather than being imprisoned by biology. The next morning, I woke up in my house, made coffee in my kitchen, and got ready for work at the job I had chosen. Before I left, I stopped at my front door and looked down at that doormat one more time. Earned, not given. Those 3 words had become my life philosophy, my reminder, my victory statement. Everything good in my life I had earned. Not through entitlement, not through manipulation, not through obligation, but through honest work, difficult choices, and unwavering commitment to building something real. I stepped over the doormat, locked my door behind me, and walked to my car with my head high. The morning sun was bright, the air was cool, and the future stretched out before me, full of possibility. For the first time in my life, that future belonged entirely to me, and I intended to make the most of it.